Hi, my name is Jake, and I am a bookish drummer. So for this video, I will be discussing my favorite authors who write short story collections and overall my favorite short story collections that I've read. If you guys know me well, some of my all-time favorite authors have written several short story and novella collections. Like, they're very good at writing short fiction. So for this video, I will be talking about my favorite short story writers, authors, and my favorite overall short story collections. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into it. So overall, I will have 5 main authors that I will be talking about. These are my all-time favorite writers who write short stories. But as a fun little honorable mention, I will mention Nick Roberts, and the collection that I'm talking about is It Haunts the Mind. Now, I've read a few of his novels. This is the only collection that I've read of his. This might be his only one. I'm not really sure. But I really did enjoy this one and gave it 4 stars. If you couldn't tell, it is indeed a horror collection, and most of the stories in here are great and worth reading. Overall, I did give this collection 4 stars. Probably my favorites in the collection that I can remember are like Sally Under the Bed, The Devil's Road was very good, Voodoo Bay, and the title story, It Haunts the Mind. So like, overall, very good horror collection. Could have made my top 5 if I've read maybe a few more by him, but I think he will eventually make the list. But for right now, I have my top 5 favorite short story authors to talk about. The first one I'll mention, probably at the number 5 spot for now, could rise up if I read more from her. Another horror author that has written a lot of great horror collections would be Mariana Enrique. And this is my favorite collection of hers. I believe this is the first one that I've read. The Dangers of Smoking in Bed. Now, I love Mariana Enrique because she does have a certain flavor to her short story collections, and the way that she writes her horror stories, very unique, unlike any author that I've read previously. They just have a certain feel and atmosphere and kind of just a certain gloom and doom to her stories that other authors that I've read just don't have. So her writing is very unique, and while her collections, maybe I don't remember like certain short stories over other ones, I just remember the feeling I have reading these short stories. So probably this is my favorite of hers. I've read 2 of her other collections. I think it's mentioned here. Things We Lost in the Fire, also great collection. Her newest one, I can't remember what it is. I didn't like it quite as much as her other ones, but there are some standout ones in there. Overall, I just love the way that she writes. And I've read, I think, one of her novels, which, again, I can't remember. It was this one. I didn't really like it that much. I prefer her short fiction, actually. So, yeah, Dangers of Smoking in Bed. Just the feeling I had reading all these short stories. Very unique, very well crafted, and I love her writing, and hopefully we get some more collections from her in the future, and then maybe she might rise up a bit. Also, before I go any further, there are some authors that are my favorites that I just don't think write great short fiction. Brandon Sanderson, I love his novels. He's even written some great novellas, but overall his short stories from the ones that I've read just aren't very compelling. And also Stephen Graham Jones, who, again, fantastic horror author, has written some of my favorite horror novellas and novels and series, but his short fiction is very hit or miss, not really one of my favorites. So yeah, those 2 are not included. Number 5 spot goes to Mariana Enrique, and the number 4 spot I'm going to have to go with Haruki Murakami. And again, I probably prefer his novels, and he is a little bit more hit and miss with his short stories. But like with Mariana Enrique, I think they just have a certain unique style to them. Some of them, you could argue not much happens in them, and maybe they're a bit boring and not much happens plot-wise. But I think the way that he writes them, his characters are always intriguing, and just what he decides to write about is peculiar at best. But yeah, some of his short stories are just really out there and weird. Like, probably my favorite collection of his maybe is After the Quake, which I think kind of revolves around a certain earthquake that happened in Japan. And these are supposed to revolve around those, but there's a frog on the cover, and probably his most memorable short story involves a frog, a giant talking frog. And man, his short stories are just so weird. Like, he's known for having weird fiction, and these short stories can either be kind of mundane or just batshit nuts and like what the hell is going on. So you never really know what you're gonna get with Murakami, and I love that feeling of like you're jumping into a short story and you have no idea what's gonna happen. And yeah, he's written several collections. After the Quake and Men Without Women are probably two of my favorites from him that I've read. Also, First Person Singular. These are probably like his three best collections. Two of his collections that I've had, mixed experiences with are The Elephant Vanishes and Blind Willow Sleeping Woman. Some of these are definitely filled with some of the more mundane stories or the forgettable ones. So if you're going to read Murakami short fiction, I would highly recommend either First Person Singular, Men Without Women, or After the Quake. These are some of his best short stories in these collections. So if you want some weird and wacky or slightly mundane but interesting character-filled stories, check out these three collections from Murakami. And the next two authors I have to talk about for the number 2 and 3 spot are actually my number 1 and 2 favorite authors of all time. So you guys are probably not wondering who these are. Obviously, I'll put for right now the number 3 spot is Stephen King, and he is my second favorite author of all time. And mostly his short stories consist of either horror, sci-fi, or literary. And especially early on in his career, especially with stuff like Night Shift and Skeleton Crew, it's heavily leaning towards horror. He never really strains away from that too far, but definitely further on in his career, you get a lot more literary stuff. But Night Shift is definitely my favorite of his short story collections. This one was his very first published one in 1978. And basically 90% of this is just straight up horror. And it's really fun, really dark, really great horror fiction from Stephen King. And it probably includes my all-time favorite Stephen King short story, which is Quitters, Inc. Let me know down in the comments below if you agree with that, because Quitters, Inc., you won't forget that one. But yeah, Night Shift is definitely my favorite. Skeleton Crew, while a bit overrated, does have some of my all-time favorite Stephen King short fiction. You got stuff like The Jaunt, Survivor Type, The Raft, just bangers from Stephen King. Like, these are absolutely some of the best Stephen King short stories he's ever written. It does have some duds in here. Don't get me wrong with that. And just the fact that Stephen King has written so many short story collections in his career, I believe 6 or 7 at this point. He does have some duds, but overall, most of them, I would argue, are worth reading and or great. So, his first two, very much horror-filled, but also you've got stuff like Just After Sunset, which is kind of a mix. Most of these are short stories, some of these are novellas. Mostly great short stories. Some of them are horror, some of them are literary, kind of a great mix between the two, if you will. So overall, Stephen King, while he's not perfect at writing short stories, it is always a lot of fun just to see what direction he's going to go in. Some of them are going to be duds, but some of them are going to be magnificent. And you guys might be wondering, my favorite author of all time, is he going to be my favorite short story author of all time? No, but he's really a high up there at the number 2 spot. And I'm, of course, talking about George R.R. Martin, my all-time favorite author, obviously the author of A Song of Ice and Fire, my all-time favorite fantasy series, Storm of Swords, my favorite book of all time. But George R.R. Martin, before he got famous for all of that in the 70s and 80s, he was writing a shit ton of short story collections. I believe these are his 6 short story collections that he wrote in the late 70s and early 80s. And I think one of these was even 90s. I don't know, but either way, he wrote a ton of short stuff, and it's really good in my opinion. So if you don't want to read all 6 of those collections, you want kind of a more condensed version of like some of his best short fiction, which includes short stories and novelettes and novellas, definitely check out Volume 1 of Dream Songs. This has some of his best works, in my opinion. Not all of them, but most of them. You've got A Song for Leah, which just has some of his best short fiction out there. This was his first published one all the way back in 1976. And honestly, probably 2 of my favorite short stories of all time from any author would be With Morning Comes Mistfall, and probably my number 1 favorite, The Second Kind of Loneliness. So fantastic short stories in here. You've also got Dark, Dark World of Tunnels, The Hero, Run to Starlight, which is actually kind of an alien football story, which is just hilarious. The Exit to San Brita. You've got obviously some novellas, which technically don't count for this, but A Song for Leah, the title story, is also fantastic. You've got Sand Kings, which is one of the best sci-fi horror short stories ever written. So if anything, go check out Sand Kings. It's free on YouTube. Go listen to it. It's amazing. And I'm actually in the middle of reading all of George R. R. Martin's older stuff. So I've already gone back and reread Sand Kings, A Song for Leah, Songs of Stars and Shadows. And I'm going to be checking out his other ones like Night Flyers, Songs the Dead Men Sing, which is a very weird cover, but just excuse it for that. And then Portraits of His Children. He just is great. In my opinion, George R. R. Martin is my favorite because he's so great at writing, obviously novels and series, but he's so great at writing short stories, novelettes, novellas, and even short novels. Like, he can do no wrong, in my opinion. And in my opinion, he is one of the better short story writers of all time. But he comes in at the number 2 spot on my list. So you guys might be wondering who my number 1 favorite short story author of all time is. And it's arguably, like, I love this author mainly like 90% because of his short stories and his short story collections. He does have some great novels, mind you, but his short story collections are amazing. And the number 1 spot has to go to Ray Bradbury. One of my all-time favorite authors, mainly because of his short story collections. Illustrated Man, definitely one of the best short story collections I've ever read. This is actually one of the first ones that I read. I read some of them in high school, but then after high school, I got back into him and, man, quickly fell in love with him, and I had to get basically all of his short story collections, and I have a bunch of them. I've got a good stack of them right here, and these aren't even all of them, by the way, but it's most of them. And yeah, he has just written, I think, possibly like over 500 short stories. And really, while not all of them are fantastic, all of them are worth reading. I've gotten something out of all of his short stories, whether they're like excellent or just good or even mediocre. Like, all of them are worth reading in my mind. I'll try to show off all of my favorites, but it's going to be hard to condense down to a list because all of these are just so great in my mind. Obviously, The Illustrated Man is probably his best. Like, this is where it all started for me. And it's just all great science fiction short stories. And this was written in like the early 50s, I believe, or late 50s. And it really just shows you how ahead of his time he was. And these short stories are still great to this day. Love Illustrated Man. Probably my second favorite would be The October Country. This is definitely more on the horror side of things, but still great nonetheless. You got The Martian Chronicles, which is a bit overrated in my mind, but still great nonetheless. And then there's just a slew of underrated, forgotten gems with Ray Bradbury. You got Quicker Than the Eye, I Sing the Body, Electric, Driving Blind, which is one of my favorites, The Toynbee Confector, Long After Midnight, One More for the Road, which is another one of my favorites, and then 2 of my favorites that I haven't read in a while that I'm kind of itching to go back to reread. We'll Always Have Paris, which has Ray Bradbury right on the cover there, and The Cat's Pajamas. So obviously, he's my favorite short story writer because he's just written so much short story goodness, and he had to be number 1 on this list. Even though George R. R. Martin is my all-time favorite author, Ray Bradbury is my number 1 favorite short story writer. So he had to make number 1. You've obviously, if I can recap the list here, number 1 is Ray Bradbury. Number 2 and 3, kind of interchangeable really, is George R. R. Martin and Stephen King. Number 4 for now is Haruki Murakami, but Mariana Enrique at number 5 could overcrown him. I'm not sure if she could raise to the heights of Stephen King or George R. R. Martin, but you never know. And then number 6, kind of an honorable mention, is Nick Roberts. And then Stephen Graham Jones, maybe an honorable mention, but he's very hit or miss for short stories. And Brandon Sanderson just isn't that great with short fiction. I'll just stick with Stormlight and The Cosmere, his novels. But what I want to know is, you know what? I haven't even clapped yet. I keep forgetting to clap in my own damn videos. So that's my list here. That's my top 5. But what I want to know is if you agree or disagree with my list, and also just recommend me some great fiction writers or short fiction writers. So who are writers that you think write the best short stories? Comment that down below, and also just let me know any short story collections by anybody that you think is worth reading for me. Comment that down below, we'll chat about it. And of course, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a quick thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and if you are subscribed, stay subscribed for more content. I try to post every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I've also got the Bookish Sermon Discord down below, where we've always got tons of buddy reads and read-alongs happening all the damn time. Got my Patreon link down below if you want to go support me there for as little as $1 a month, and my Amazon wish list if you'd like to buy me a book. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a fantastic day. Bye!